Thanks for tuning in to part 2 of Joint Health, Prevention of Joint Issues. I firmly believe that many of us wait until, unfortunately, we have a tremendous amount of breakdown, arthritis, inflammation, joint destruction before we engage in protocols that can be helpful for us. In Joint Health 1, Preserving Your Joints, I talked about the components that lead to that. Mechanical issues, joint instability, enzyme breakdown and degradation, inflammation because of a poor diet. Many of us have inflammatory processes that run wild in our bodies. It affects the brain, neurologically, it affects our heart, our circulatory system, it affects your joints, it affects many body parts and organs, kidneys, etc. Joints are particularly susceptible because we apply so much torque and stress to them. We walk up steps. Most of us are overweight. We talked a lot about weight in the previous joint health teaching. So there are a lot of components that I believe that we do not do enough things that we're proactive. We're 20-something, 30-something, and we think that our joints are going to function that way forever. Well, we're badly mistaken. I think we should be more proactive about joint issues, understand the role of diet, weight loss, bringing down inflammation, understanding that that these enzymes can create a huge problem for us as well. Let's go proactive now. Let's talk more about how we repair, how we prevent issues from a joint health standpoint. The first area I'd like to talk about is the use of non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. Now, those are over-the-counter and prescriptive medications that are used to reduce inflammation in a joint. Short-term gain, long-term pain is how I typify this. And what I mean by that is that the non-steroidal anti-inflammatories actually can do two things. Well, what it principally does is it interferes with the natural repairing mechanisms that the body has put in place. And it does it via two mechanisms. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs interfere with prostaglandins. There's three prostaglandins, PGE1, PGE2, PGE3. You don't really need to know all the details. One of them is more involved with more of an inflammatory mechanism. Two of them actually, one more of an anti-inflammatory mechanism. Prostaglandins inherently are created and made by the body. None of them are evil. We need them. They're even initiators for immune functioning, and they're actually the initiators for repair mechanisms. Unfortunately, if I'm producing too much prostaglandin, I have issues. And on the other hand, if I interfere with prostaglandin synthesis, or the ability to make prostaglandin with pharmaceuticals that block prostaglandin pathways, I can do a couple of things. One, that's how I develop ulcers on my stomach, and I create GI ulcers. Number two, that's how I affect my renal system and my kidneys. Number three, it encourages joint breakdown. It interferes with the normal mechanisms of repair. So non-steroidal, whether it's ibuprofen, whether it's naproxen, naproxen, Aleve, the whole ball of wax, even the ones that were typified as being safer, the COX-2 inhibitors, Celebrexes, some of the original products were pulled off of the market because of cardiovascular issues. And the reason is that same concept. Prostaglandin synthesis inhibition impairs the body's ability to repair. So what I'd like to talk to you about today is the actual joint building process. How do I rebuild joints? There's numerous ways to do that. First of all, as I've mentioned numerous times in the first video and the previous portion of this teaching, is that you really must look at everything from the dietary aspects, anti-inflammatory diets, slowing down the enzyme, the natural enzyme degradation process. But how do we do that? I mean, how do we actually do this? Let's just talk about supplements for a few minutes. First of all, support. Are there differences in glucosamine products? Yes, absolutely, without a question. What we use is a glucosamine, let me make sure I get this straight, glucosamine sulfate potassium chloride. This is not glucosamine hydrochloride mixed in with a bunch of powder as many manufacturers do. It is a fully reacted, it's reacted in a laboratory setting so that it defines the glucosamine, it purifies the glucosamine so that you, the patient, have much better absorption, much better utilization. There's ample, solid information that talks about quality forms of glucosamine actually helping to rebuild joint structures and joint spaces. Number 2, chondroitin. What is the role of chondroitin? Chondroitin, you can have very poorly extracted forms, high molecular weight, large molecular structure, poorly absorbed, does not even really get through the intestinal barrier. We know that in some cases chondroitin is only absorbed in the single-digit percentage points. Quality forms of chondroitin that are low molecular weight, that have very little in the way of excipients or debris or contaminants, whatever the terminology you would like to use, amplifies its absorptive abilities, hence gives you more glycosaminoglycan structure formation. Glucosamine, chondroitin. Are all glucosamines the same? No. Most of the research was done on glucosamine sulfate. When we use a glucosamine sulfate potassium chloride, it's fully reacted. Now, what about the cartilage itself? What about the collagen matrix? I've mentioned that collagen matrix breaks down. As collagen matrix breaks down, one of the key components, one of the key nutrients that you can use to rebuild that collagen matrix, believe it or not, is buffered C ascorbates. Buffered vitamin C in all L-ascorbate form can actually improve collagen. It is a precursor. It is a structural compound for collagen matrix. Buffered C ascorbates, quality forms of glucosamine, hydrochloride, or excuse me, sulfate with chondroitin. We use it in this prep called Joint Essentials, and then also utilizing omega-3s. Why omega-3 inhibitors? Why molecularly distilled? Why a triple refined process, not a heat extracted or chemically extracted process? Why? Because it reduces inflammation. So the mechanisms are reduce the mechanical torque and destruction through weight loss. If there's joint instability, that's got to be dealt with. You need to see your medical practitioner. Understand the value and the role of hydration and how that helps support the cushioning mechanisms. If there's a lot of breakdown of the joint structure, it is an ongoing process. It will continue to break down at a very rapid rate. We've got to try to rebuild by increasing collagen matrix and also the glycosaminoglycan structure with glucosamine and chondroitin. Also improves synovial fluid formation. So there are some of the basic parameters. The other area that I would certainly consider is something called proteolytic systemic enzymes. Why? When we have joint destruction, it's an inflammatory process. Why I tell you and discourage you from using prescriptive items as mentioned earlier, such as non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. It interferes with prostaglandins. Prostaglandins initiate repair. You can't block them completely. When I do, I inhibit repair, but I'll reduce inflammation and pain. So it's short-term gain, long-term pain. So there's a process, there's a mechanism via how pharmacologically how these drugs work. The problem with that is it doesn't do anything to help the joint to repair. This concept, proteolytic enzymes, and so on, help the joint to repair. Certainly there are other parameters that you can look into. Quality forms of MSM have a role. It is a sulfur-containing amino acid, improves repair and lubrication of the joint. You can look at things like good forms of CME. Good forms of CME, though, are a little pricey. They're expensive. S-adenylythionine, that's a great concept. And also, specific forms of hyaluronic acid improve the synovial fluid, the cushioning, the precursor once again. So this is all about trying to slow down the process of breakdown and degradation through diet, reducing mechanical force, reducing weight, and then improving the repair mechanisms via using some key nutrients. And you'll often hear from people, well, I heard that those things don't work. Obviously, if you have a torn meniscus, you have torn cartilage, you have had years of mechanical distress and trauma, joint instability, well, you have so much movement in that joint that you're completely abrading and breaking down the joint. That's a whole other issue. You should be in a proactive mode. In your 30s and 40s, you should be in a proactive mode to maintaining joint structures and joint space. Joint Essentials, omega-3 inhibitors, the buffered C ascorbates, an anti-inflammatory / Mediterranean style diet. If you have to, we incorporate some of the proteolytic types of compounds, and there's plenty of other options that you can look into. As mentioned before, don't forget the role of hormones. As our hormones decline, all of this plays. But the main area, the main thought is how I eat, how I move. Do I exercise and use and move my joints to improve lubrication? Do I hydrate? Do I drink a lot of sodas? Do I eat a lot of processed and refined? Do I use a lot of non-steroidal anti-inflammatories that break down the joint? Or do I do the very opposite of that through diet and quality supplementation to improve repair, improve the process? You're not doing something, you're not recreating anything. You're just supporting a process that is already God-given. Tune into the Ask the Pharmacist broadcast. We broadcast daily during the week, Monday through Friday, Saturday mornings as well. It's available on our website. Go to the website for the details and the information at AskJoeDiMatteo.com. And you can also call our toll-free number if you have some specific questions you'd like to speak to one of the staff members at 877-275-7743. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. God bless you. See you next time.